Imagine living in a small town where essentially everyone knows everybody. And let's just say that there are about 10 to 20 people within that village who are rather moderately successful. And so, as you can imagine, of those 20 people, they have about, let's say, 100 enemies at the bottom. 100 useless, horrible people who are jealous and resentful about the fact that these people are successful. So now the so-called intellectuals of that community come in and say damning things such as property is theft, success is oppression, and they galvanize and embolden the enemies of the successful, whom which are willing to move against them and kick down their doors. Hundreds of resentful, murderous people at the bottom of their socioeconomic distribution. Well, that's exactly what happened in the 1920s during the dekulakization of the former Soviet Union. 6 million Ukrainians dead by starvation and typhoid, leaving an entire nation left to eat their children. This is what happens when you characterize success as theft, when you promulgate the idea of collective guilt, when you try to curate equality of outcome over equality of opportunity. Today's version of collective guilt is taken on by the third wave feminist movement, which has made the discussion of wage disparity their so-called fight for voting rights. But the stats do not support their bold claims of oppression regarding their wages.
Misrepresentation of the gender pay gap, because it's a convenient misrepresentation that upon further inspection and understanding, you realize there is no gender pay gap.
This wage gap statistic that for the same work women earn 77 cents on the dollar, that's bogus. If employers could save 23% by hiring women, they'd fire all the men. The gap is just the difference between the average wages of all working men and women. It ignores factors that justify different pay. Type of job, hours worked per week. When these are taken into account, the wage gap all but disappears.
He said in his tweet, pay equity, not equality. He doesn't want fair pay for everyone based on job. He's actually saying it doesn't matter what job you have, everyone should be paid the same.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
But then you see what
the central variable in explaining economic differences between men and women is not employer discrimination, not the rise of feminism. It's that women, it's child rearing, marriage and child rearing. That's the variable. As that varies, a women's arrival or participation rate in high-level occupations varies with that. That's
Absolutely.
The okay.
It's like, so you're telling me I can get the same, I'm a smart businessman who's made a bunch of money, and I can get the same level of talent out of this woman.
or better.
Well, let's just say equal, but 75% or better. Sorry, ma'am, sorry. Or equal or probably better. That's 75 cents on the dollar. And I'm a smart businessman, and I'm not gonna go with the lower cost equal talent or better talent. That's how can I run a successful business making that kind of decision?
How can you?
Yeah, it would just, they would be hired at far higher rates.
To me, it sounds like a way for them to weaponize identity politics for their own personal gain. It is not an endeavor towards equality, but a mere struggle for power, which is a very, very dangerous game. In the WNBA, they believe they should get paid more money. However, the truth is they don't deserve it. They don't turn profit. Sue Bird tweets graphics comparing her and LeBron's pay. However, LeBron and Sue Bird are not equal. Under God, perhaps they are, but in a capitalist state, equality falls apart and meritocracy is king. If you produce more, work harder, and make more people rich, you deserve unequal pay. Only under socialism would you get paid the same as the next person who couldn't hold a candle to your ability, ethics, and competence. Under those circumstances, who the hell would even try to do anything? Like the old Soviet joke goes, they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work.
But more importantly, the pay disparity. How do you guys feel about that when you see the astronomical numbers that the NBA players make versus the pay grade that happens in the WNBA?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and a lot of us, we obviously play for the passion and love for the game. A lot of women play 2 seasons, going over season or off season, playing and then playing in the WNBA as well. So you could argue that we have a longer season and put in equal work. But, we got a lot to do. We got a lot to do. We understand that.
And if my daughter ever decides to pick up a basketball, I want her to have the same opportunity that my nephew has.
Okay, in short, I'm saying pay these women. That's what I'm saying. She shouldn't go elegant about it. You need to be paid because you command the same respect. The game is just as good.
And we also realize that if you want to grow our game, you have to actually invest in the players who are the game. If you invest in the players, those players will maybe not go overseas. They maybe will attract more ticket sales, more sponsorships. Now, I find it strange that the NBA has sponsors, the WNBA has sponsors, and our sponsors are exactly the same as the NBA. Kind of strange. We're a whole different league. We're women that hoop. We should attract female sponsors, youth community empowerment sponsors. So there are a lot of different models that we are brainstorming, hopefully, to grow our game.
So here's where we are. The WNBA recently has been making a major push to try to get paid more. Women's star Angel McCoughtry believes she should be paid like the men. Skyler Diggins compared her $115,000 salary to Harrison Barnes' $24 million salary. She goes on to say she's made more all-star teams and all-league teams than he has, and that she should be paid accordingly. The only problem is Harrison Barnes works for a company that generates nearly $9 billion annually. Skyler Diggins works for a company that only generates $60 million. That's about 150 times less money. Of the $60 million in revenue, not a single dollar is profit. And as a whole, they have become steadily less and less profitable over the past 22 years. If Skyler Diggins actually thought she was as competent as an athlete as Harrison Barnes, she would join the NBA. There's no rule that says she couldn't, and she would get paid way more. But we all know that is not a plausible endeavor. Not because of sexism, but because of sex. More categorically speaking, the differences in the abilities of the sexes. Now, I'm all for equality of opportunity, but I'm not for, and will never be for, equality of outcome, because it is a dangerous ideology. I mean, fundamentally, as human beings, we strive to produce inequality innately. The only reason anyone strives to better themselves, or to develop a skill, or to move forward in life at all, is to produce inequality. You're trying to rise above the mediocre masses every time you make an effort at anything. And so everything that we associate positive movement forward to, your positive motivation, is actually an attempt to render the world more unequal in a just way. So, after all that hard work, wouldn't it be really, really annoying and possibly breed resentment to get paid the same as someone who isn't even as half as competent as you are? Well, this is what modern feminist women are clamoring for. Equal pay, despite equal competence or production. And they attribute the inequality of riches to simply their oppression rather than their competency. Just like the Soviets just before the 1920s. Just before they shipped the kulaks to Siberia to die. Just before children caught typhoid. Just before 6 million Ukrainians starved to death and turned an entire nation into cannibals. A dangerous and murderous road it is to go down, biting the hand that feeds you. The NBA is the only reason the WNBA has been able to stay alive, thanks to the multi-million-dollar subsidies they pump into that business every year. A business that has not seen a single year of profitability in its 22 years of existence. Yet they are attacked by the WNBA's constituency. The very first thing that needs to happen is to let go of this notion that is because they are women, they are being underfunded. Ladies and gentlemen, this is America. And as much as some people hate minorities and some people hate women, capitalism comes first. And that won't ever stop the dollar. LeBron James is as black as can be, and he's a billionaire on paper. Beyonce is black and a woman, and she too one day will touch $1 billion. Oppression is not the variable here. The variable truly is that the product sucks, which is why they were dropped from women's networks like Lifetime and Oxygen, because they brought their ratings down. The truth is, reform is needed. In volleyball, the women's nets are lower than the nets the men use. This same sort of thing needs to happen in the WNBA to make the game more exciting. But some women take offense to that. A prime example of letting your ego get in your own way, to the point where you're making yourself literally lose out on money. Another marketing strategy I would like to see would be to cultivate and sell rivalries, the way they do in combat sports and even some of the Vince McMahon stuff in the WWE. There needs to be some level of grandiosity and showmanship like we've never seen before in team sports. Remember, the NBA was a failing product before personalities like Dr. J, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and of course, the great Michael Jordan. The players and rivalries carried the sport. I believe the WNBA needs to harp onto that idea and take some stuff from boxing and MMA in terms of the press conferences and how they are conducted to sell fights. Maybe even put all the girls in a bubble and create a reality TV series following them, and perhaps attempt to push a narrative that creates adversaries between the teams. Whatever it may be, it needs to be something that creates more personalities within the sport, like what Michael was to the NBA, or what McGregor was to the UFC, or Ali to boxing, even what Ric Flair was to the World Wrestling Federation. Because what a travesty it would be if women could no longer strive to play professional basketball. Something must be done, and envy is not the answer.